Hello, Tuesday. Financial Times Opinion. A New Way of Thinking About the Global Machine by Cullen Roche, Pragcap. Pragcap Cullen Roche has got himself an opinion piece into the Financial Times. This has got to be good news. I say that kind of because we have been following Cullen Roche for many a long year now. And obviously what he has been saying is respected enough now to get its own slot in the FT. Must be good. For us to show that we've been following the right type of people. Maybe. Anyway, this I want to throw in. It's not really part of anything, but I just want to throw it in. It's this US Davis thing. Now, you know that was the pepper spray. Obviously that wasn't the only incident in that time of whatever we call it. If you haven't heard, the administration of UC Davis is holding poet and professor Joshua Clover and 11 students accountable for their alleged role in protests that led to the shutdown of a campus US bank. District Attorney Jeff Reisig is charging campus protesters with 20 counts each of obstructing movement in a public place and 1 count of conspiracy. If convicted, the protesters could face up to 11 years each in prison and a $1 million damages fine. I just threw this in because, as the article states, there's no video to back this up, as in to get it out there. There was for the pepper spray one. They are quite likely to have jail terms, and it's not, even if it's not the jail terms, because the bank is kind of suing UC Davis are wanting these people prosecuted so they pay the fines. And there will be big fines levied against these people, probably more than the jail time. But they will be hit with huge fines for this. It's just a part of the United States going in a direction. And it's not really to be labelled a nice direction. Asia Pacific Financial Times, Clinton warns India over Iranian oil. Hillary Clinton, US Secretary of State, urged India to do more to reduce its oil imports from Iran as part of Washington's continuing efforts to curb Tehran's nuclear program by cutting off an important source of revenue. Speaking in Calcutta, Eastern India, on Monday, Mrs. Clinton said that India's efforts to reduce its purchases of Iranian oil were welcome, but she added that New Delhi should do even more to reduce its dependence on Iranian crude. You know, I've got this thing about Iran. I don't think they're nearly as bad as generally Americans are led to believe. Financial Times, Iran accepts renminbi for crude oil. Iran is accepting renminbi, RNB, for some of the crude oil it supplies to China. Industry executives in Beijing and Kuwait and Dubai-based bankers said, partly as a consequence of US sanctions aimed at limiting Tehran's nuclear program. Tehran is spending the currency, which is not freely convertible, the renminbi, on goods and services imported from China. Link 5. Spanish industrial output downturn deepens in March. Madrid's Spanish industrial output contracted at a faster pace in March, official data showed today. Production by Spain's factories and power generators slumped 7.5% in March from a year earlier. Followed a decline in industrial output of 5.3% in February and a drop of 4.4% in January. Link 6. Spain to spend billions on bank rescue. Spain is planning a state bailout of Bankia. the country's third biggest bank by assets, in a move likely to involve the injection of billions of euros of public money into the troubled lender. It's starting. Link 7, IMF's Lagarde. Christine, baby. Let the EU bailout funds go to the banks without sovereign pit stops. This is her talk at Brookings, which I didn't actually listen to. I listened to the one before it and after. I thought, I'm not listening to her. Anyway, but this is vaguely sensible in a mad world. Keeping a country like Spain afloat financially may not be enough to salvage its banks without direct injections of capital, according to Chrissy Lagarde. The managing director of the IMF renewed calls to rejigger European rescue programs to allow for direct recapitalisation of the region's banks without forcing funds to flow through government coffers first. In other words, you've got the EFSF and the ESM, and if they've got funds to do bailing out, they should just directly recapitalise Spanish banks, for instance, without lending the money to the Spanish government, and then the Spanish government does the recapitalisation of the banks. As I say, it's a good idea in a mad world. 8, and the headline that was so predictable it almost brings tears to the eyes. Cameron vows no going back on deficit. David Cameron will invoke Margaret Thatcher, not for turning, rhetoric on Tuesday, promising the coalition will stick to its long and hard deficit reduction programme in spite of the electoral backlash against austerity in France and Greece. The austerity really hasn't even started in the UK yet. They've put up some taxes, but the actual austerity, the grabbing back of spending, is only due to start about now. And of course, there will be turning back. And the thing is about turning back, as soon as you turn back, to turn back again, in other words, to go back to austerity, is a huge quantum leap then. In other words, when you've turned back from austerity, actually to turn back and then go to austerity again, if the market forces you to it, is such a huge step that it'll probably break an awful lot of things. This one I'll read in full because it's really weird and doing my head in. Brussels tries to extend welfare rights for Turks in EU countries. Now, I've been following this for a couple of weeks now, normally via the Slog blog. The government is preparing for a bitter clash with Brussels over EU plans to seize control of the welfare system by forcing Britain to grant benefits to non-Europeans. Okay. Brussels is planning to sign a deal with Turkey without Britain's consent that could extend its citizens' access to the UK social security system. Now, if my information so far is right, the EU Commission have actually signed already, and it's not could extend its citizens' access to the UK social security system, but will. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the EU Commission, Brussels, have signed a contract with Turkey that they can come into European countries and use their social security systems. Note to people that don't know, Turkey is not a member of either the Eurozone or the EU area. Chris Grayling, the Employment Minister, fears the move will lead to a string of welfare deals with countries outside the EU, which this country would be powerless to resist. It's irrelevant whether they're going to use more countries if the Turkish people can come to European countries and just sit there and say, I would like these social security services. That's quite bad enough. When I say bad enough, I'll come to what I mean in the end. He has instructed British officials in Brussels to fight the proposed agreement with Turkey hard when it is presented later this month. Now, I could be wrong, and they're right, because this blog website is dedicated to Turkey. So I'm probably wrong, they haven't signed yet, but I think they have signed letters of agreement that they are going to sign at the end of the month, and the chances of them not signing at the end of the month are minimal. Grayling said the government takes the very firm view that there should be no opening up of our welfare system to people coming from abroad who do not intend to work and contribute to British society. Again, I'm sure the Turkish people would love to go to Britain and work and contribute to the British society. Our arrangements are for Britain to decide, not Brussels. I am not happy with the way the EU is behaving. Europe should not be negotiating social security agreements on our behalf. That's why we are going through the courts to stop them. Good luck with that. What courts are you going to use to stop the EU and Brussels Commission? Turkey, which has about 75 million people, has applied to join the EU. The Pact on Social Security, Brussels believes, will enhance the special relationship with Turkey and permit Turkey to align its policies on social security coordination with those of the EU in preparation for future accession. But what they're doing is they're saying you can come in and use all our social security things, and probably people in Europe can go to Turkey and use their social security things. But this is so wild. This is manic madness by the EU Commission. Or it's absolute genius. Now, normally, the normal run of thinking would be it's absolute madness, because that is what they do in Brussels, absolute madness. But I think there is a vague chance that this is absolute genius. I heard a figure, I think this week or recently, it's weird. Turkey is a very young country. There are as many students in Turkish schools, which are really quite good, schools, colleges and universities, there are as many students in those institutions as there are in the whole of the rest of the European area. Turkey is a young country. Europe is a very aging country. Somewhere along the line, Europe will need to get an influx of new blood, young blood. If they have chosen Turkey as the place to get it from, I think that is very good thinking. It's probably better than getting it from Eastern Europe or Northern Africa. But I just can't believe that the EU Commission in Brussels has made this probably very intelligent decision. I think I'll finish there. Goodbye.